Loud. I want to welcome everybody to our forum this morning. We've got Bill Hansen with us live from Grand Marais, Minnesota. Bill was a Peace Corps volunteer in Uganda and got evacuated out of that post as a result of COVID. And I'll let him tell you all about that and all about the work that he has done. In terms of your view, you may want to do a speaker view because then you can see Bill and also be able to easily see the slides. We're going to have ample time at the end of the forum for questions. Actually, I should have asked you that, Bill. Would you rather just go through the presentation and then take questions at the end?
Yeah, well, people can, I guess, can ask questions during, but I'm not sure how that works. Yeah, I'll probably just go through the slides and then.
Okay. And I'll be monitoring the chat, and then afterwards,
yeah, that's a good idea.
Ask a question. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce you today, Bill Hansen, live from Grand Marais, Minnesota.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. As many of you probably know, Kathy and I are old friends. We go way back to practically when we were teenagers. So it's a great pleasure. And whenever Kathy asks me to do something, which is pretty often, especially donate to things, I can never say no. But I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me and having me. And thank you so much for all the work that you do as a congregation. I admire your congregation more than any other, I think. So I served as a Peace Corps volunteer starting in June of 2019. It had been a lifelong ambition of mine to join the Peace Corps. I'm actually old enough that I was 8 years old when Kennedy created the Peace Corps by executive order in 1961. And it was big. I lived in Duluth at the time. And it was a big news in our family. Our family, big fans of Kennedy's and big fans of the concept. Of course, Humphrey had pushed the concept, Hubert Humphrey had pushed the concept of the Peace Corps unsuccessfully in the Senate before that. So my parents were aware of that as also being Humphrey fans. So when Peace Corps was created, it was big news, a lot of discussion. And I vividly remember having it explained to me what it was. And at 8 years old, I remember having a feeling in my chest, kind of a hollow feeling in my chest, and just thinking to myself, that's for me. That's what I want to do. I want to be in the Peace Corps. And so I held on to that feeling my whole life. And as it turned out, the typical time people do Peace Corps is after college when they're 22, 23, although it's available to all ages, starting at the age of 18, I believe. But the vast majority of people are recent college graduates. And I joined my family business, Sawbill Canoe Outfitters, when I was that age and just was too busy and wasn't able to do the Peace Corps, so set it aside until I retired. And then it occurred to me one day that I could join the Peace Corps, and I investigated and I did apply and I did get it. I was hoping to go as a couple with my wife, but she was still working and didn't have any interest in going. So we negotiated for a while, and she allowed me very kindly, and I'm really grateful to her to go and be absent. Peace Corps typically is a 27-month commitment, 3 months of training, and then 2 years at your site in a country. They're in some 70 countries around the world, 72, 73, something like that. It changes daily, but and Peace Corps Volunteers is a federal program of the federal government, and you have to be invited by the government. Obviously we don't impose ourselves where we're not wanted. And then the government of the country where you serve actually sets the agenda of what work you do. And so I applied to Peace Corps just generally and let them assign me the country, although I had told them that I had a deep interest in Africa and some experience in Africa. So they ended up posting me in Uganda. And I had actually visited Uganda very briefly for a few days 7 or 8 years before that, ironically, in the exact same region where I ended up being posted. So I had no idea when I was there as a tourist that I would be back as a Peace Corps volunteer. But with that, I'm going to go to the slides because that's way more interesting than listening to me talk. And I'll go through these hopefully fairly quickly, and then you can ask questions. So this is my cohort of the Peace Corps. I think it was about 45 people, and you can see mostly young people. There are a few other people, nobody my age. I was the oldest in the cohort, but there were a couple of people in their 50s and a handful in their 40s. The only thing, a wonderful group of people, obviously. and also have the Peace Corps, the country director, who I'll introduce later, and then the U.S. Ambassador to Uganda is in the white-haired woman right in the center. She has since retired, and there's I guess I have an interim ambassador right now. But anyway, this was our swearing-in ceremony, and so prior to this, we had 5 weeks of kind of federal onboarding, and I won't talk about it much, as what you would expect, fairly standard training for getting a federal job, and then Peace Corps training, cultural training, that kind of thing. Oh, the unique thing about this group is we had 5 people in this group who were born in Africa, mostly, I think, all raised in Africa, and then immigrated to the US, became US citizens, and then were returning as Peace Corps volunteers to serve in Africa. So that was very unique. We hadn't had, I don't think any Peace Corps cadre has ever had that before. It was just sort of a coincidence, but it was really nice because it gave a good perspective. So I just have to figure out how to advance this. So this is Kampala. This is the taxi park in Kampala. All these vans are taxis. I didn't actually take this picture, but it just gives you so after training, we went to Kampala to be sent out to our sites. And this is heading out to the site, and this is crossing the Nile River. So Uganda is a country about the size of Wisconsin with 30 million people. It's landlocked in sort of east central or southern central Africa, borders on Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Sudan. And so this is crossing the Nile, and it also borders on Lake Victoria, which is just out of sight to the north of, on this picture, you're actually seeing Lake Victoria. And I was posted to the far eastern part of the Uganda in the mountains, and the city there, the closest city is Mbale. And so this is the central Mbale, the central square of Mbale. This orange edifice is a clock tower. This was actually a pretty quiet day in Mbale. This is a video, I can play it. Pretty quiet day in Mbale. So that was Mbale, and Mbale, we stayed in Mbale for about another 6 weeks and had language training, and we had homestays there, and this was my homestay family. Turned out we had a ton in common. We were the same age. We were both expecting twin grandchildren, and just super cool people. James Maloney, I joked that they were Irish because their last name was Maloney. James and Rose Maloney, and James was a retired veterinarian, and Rose is basically a retired politician, local politician, and but they also farm pretty extensively on the side. Lovely people, had a great time with them. This was my language teacher, and this was actually at a wedding for his sister. You can see he had a deep influence on me and the way I dressed, and this is pretty normal formal dress in Uganda, but this is Mongo Francis. His name literally is Mongo. And he was a deep influence on me. Wonderful guy, really bright, 2 master's degrees, speaks 7 languages. He's actually working on a couple more. He probably speaks 9 by now. Brilliant guy, and a really good friend. I'm showing you people now, which doesn't mean much to you, but I just want to get these people's faces up because they were people that were had deep influence on me while I was there. This was my boss, my supervisor. Peace Corps hooks you up with an organization, and the organization I got hooked up with was a very small startup cooperative called Friends of Mothers Initiative. And this was the executive director, Massa Frank. And a wonderful guy, really, really easy to work for. And he had started a very successful coffee growing cooperative. The cooperative was women coffee growers, thus the Friends of Mothers. And he had started a very successful one about 70 kilometers north of here. And then when it really got on its feet, he left and came and started up this new one because he likes to do startups and he likes to bring more and more people out of poverty, and just a wonderful human being and a joy to work with. And then this was my counterpart. And in Peace Corps, they assign you someone that you sort of is your daily contact, the person you work with the closest. And some people's counterparts, they saw them once and never saw them again. Some people worked with them lightly. Some people practically moved in with them. In my case, this is Mahasilama Ronald, and truly my best friend in Uganda. And you can see from our faces how this was literally our first day of work. And basically this attitude between us maintained right until the day I left. And I still talk to him, at least 3 times a week via text. And wonderful guy. He's a social worker, graduate social worker, also farms his mother's farm. He's the son of a polygamist. He has 22 brothers and 20 some daughters, or 20 some sisters. He doesn't really know how many, but he's the oldest of all the children, which puts a lot of pressure on him to excel. But he and his father wanted him to be a lawyer, but he loves social work, and he's a darn good social worker. And so I worked with him 4 half days a week directly. And we just had, one of the first things he said to me was, "I like to laugh and have fun. Do you like to laugh and have fun?" And I said, yes. And we did laugh and have a lot of fun. This was my other counterpart. I didn't work with him as often, Yusuf Swebugo. And he, one interesting thing about Uganda is there's about a 20% Islamic minority there, but and the rest of the country is different denominations of Christian, but there's no tension at all between the religions. So Joseph is a Muslim, and or Yusuf is a Muslim, and just a great guy. And so I wanted to show his picture too. And then on the left here is John Nanda, and he was the chair of the board of the organization of Friends of Mothers, and basically set up the organization. And he was a local vicar in Mbale that had taken he's an Anglican vicar. He'd taken a small congregation of about 15 people and increased it to about 1,500 people over his career. And now he's the bishop of the district bishop. So very powerful. That in Uganda, that's like basically being part of the government. It's sort of a parallel government. And what a wonderful guy. He's extremely progressive, which is sort of rare. Uganda's kind of a conservative country, but John was very progressive, and he and I were right on the same wave. I mean, he would fit right in at the Unitarian Church in Duluth in his attitudes, and just a wonderful human being. And then on the right is James Ham, who's the country director he's an American, the country director of Peace Corps in Uganda. And he came up to visit me, and I introduced these 2 guys, and they immediately, I mean, they were brothers from a different mother. They immediately hit it off, and it was wonderful to start that friendship, which I'm sure is ongoing. James, a retired Navy officer that served in the Peace Corps out of college, and then went back sort of in retirement to work for the Peace Corps, and also a great guy. Whoops, sorry. So this is my next door neighbor and kind of my guardian angel, Juliet Kangalasa, and she's a coffee farmer, and a darn good one. Farms about 10 acres of organic free trade coffee directly across the road from where I live. So I'll talk about her more later, but she was really she and her husband were my guardian angels in the community, and really watched out for me. And then this is my best friend daily, Juliet's son, Timoth. And Timoth, lived right across the road from me. He's 12. I think he turned 13 while I was there. And we interacted every day for sure. And I was teaching him guitar lessons here. And he was sort of a unofficial language tutor to me, helped me a lot with language and many other things. We had a good friendship. Timoth built this bike from scratch, old motorcycle tires. People are very impressed with this. I was very impressed with this. It had a kickstand. It's not meant to ride, it's meant to haul heavy loads. So it's set up for water jugs and coffee sacks for bringing coffee out of the fields. But he designed this and built it himself, and it was very effective, and even had a kickstand and a kind of a suspension system. And I was super impressed. And he's a very good student, top in his class. And after I'd known him for a few weeks, he said to me one day, how much school would I have to go to if I wanted to design airplanes? And so I encouraged him in that regard. And I think he's headed for engineering school, and I'm going to make darn sure he goes, no matter what. So quite a kid. This is the road going into, so now I'm arriving in my village. I was at 5,000 feet in the Mount Elgon mountain range in eastern Uganda, just 30 kilometers or so from the Kenyan border. Mount Elgon is, I think, the 4th highest mountain in Africa. It's a 12,000 feet, 13,000 feet, something like that. I was at 5,000 feet in the essentially the foothills of the Mount Elgon Range. It's also a national park, and that's where I had been a couple of years previous, visiting there on the Kenyan side. It's a national park that actually spans, half of it's in Kenya, half of it's in Uganda. And I was just a couple of kilometers. That's actually the hills in the back there are the park. I was just like 3 kilometers from the park boundary. And then this was my compound. I ended up in kind of it was a very modest village. People, dirt floors, hauled water, low income, village. They did have electricity, as you can see, although that had just come in like 3 years ago. The road was just put in 10 years ago. But I lived in this mansion in a compound. And there was a local doctor who grew up on this land and put himself through school and I have a picture of him, I think. He got a he became an orthopedic surgeon. And so he built this really nice house as a retirement home, but he hadn't retired yet. And he worked across the country. So it was basically a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, pretty modern home, although unfinished and unoccupied. So he had a caretaker living there, and it really functioned as a community center for the community. Of course, he's related to everybody. So people would come in this gate and just come into the house, and it was quite a hub of activity. And after I'd been there a couple of months, he put in a great big, 48-inch flat screen TV, and then it really became the hub of the community. And it was pesky in a way because I was always surrounded by crowds of people, but it was great because it made, I was in the community 24/7. There were times I had to just put on my headphones and chill out, but most mornings when I walked out the gate, this bull was there to greet me. Luckily, he was a friendly bull and didn't cause any trouble. This is the house, and that's my roommate in the pink shirt standing on the porch. Beautiful home, but unfinished. This was my room in the house. I wasn't supposed to be in the house. I was supposed to have an apartment that was behind the house, but it wasn't done yet. So they moved me as a temporary measure into this room. And my roommate, Kenneth, lived across the street. He was also a son of Juliet, who you saw earlier, 27-year-old guy, just the perfect roommate. And my hunch was if I had stayed, I would have probably stayed in this room the whole time because there was no real action to finish my little apartment. And I was perfectly happy here. And Kenneth was the ideal roommate. Eventually he moved out, he got married, moved out. But so you can see my water filter there, my water source, which was filtered, and just my study sheets up on the wall for language, and the bedspread or the blanket that Peace Corps gave me, which was usually not used, but there were a few nights that I had to use it. And then this is the doctor on the left here. And he was called Wefula, which wasn't really his name. I can't even remember his name, but everybody called him Wefula, which meant born in the rain. And that's a traditional name there. And then you can see the apartment I was supposed to have was being used for the cows and the goats and the chickens. It was quite a menagerie. It was really basically a sort of a working farm that inside the compound. The house was quite beautiful, but they still cooked in this kitchen, which was outside, and just cooked on this open fire. And I bought and supplied a high efficiency charcoal stove, and they used it a couple times and then cast it aside and just continued on the fire. It's what they were used to. My roommate Kenneth was kind of in charge of food, and his wife when he got married, but they had like young boys that actually did the cooking, that they ordered to do the cooking. And this was the kitchen shack. So there was just an open fire inside there and did the cooking. This was the view from the road outside the gate. Once I got past the bull, this is what I saw. And this is an iconic peak called Mount Wanalay. And it's at about 8,500 feet, 9,000 feet at the top. And you can see up at the top there's a row of trees that are kind of silhouetted against the sky. And those are actually planted to mark the park boundaries. So that was it was all farms going up there. That was about, actually to the top, probably 5 kilometers away. And then it started with the park. So this was kind of my territory. And you can see stunningly beautiful, also cool for Africa, which was nice because of the altitude. And then this was that was looking west. This was looking east toward Kenya, and had a 60-mile view. This was actually taken from right inside the compound. And then this is the compound, the ever-present goats and the gate again. And this was the veranda where I sat every day, and you can see Wanalea in the background there. So quite a nice place to hang out. And when I wasn't working, I'd sit on this veranda and drink tea and visit with people that came and went. Many people came in through that gate. And this was the living room. This was after the TV came, and they did get some furniture. Before this, there was no furniture, but nobody really lived here. So it just was a revolving cast of community members coming in to watch TV, women watching soap operas during the day. After dinner, the men of the village would come, or a lot of people actually would come and watch soccer. And then late at night, the teenagers would come and watch music videos, and all at top volume. And yeah, it was my room was right off of this room, so it was annoying but also stimulating at the same time. And then this on the left is Kenneth, my roommate, and then this is his wife that he married after I'd been there for a few months. And I actually, it's a long story, I won't tell it, but I actually had a hand in bringing them or sanctioning their marriage. Basically went to bat for him with her parents, telling them that he was a good guy. He was very old for getting married. 27 is really ancient for getting married. And he's a guy who's not self-promoting at all, very quiet, but the people who knew him really respected him, and just as honest and as hardworking as could be. So I was able, his parents were a little off-put by his personality, but I was able to vouch for him and sealed the deal, and or he sealed the deal, and they got married and were super happy together. This is Juliet picking coffee in her plantation across the road. So you can see the coffee berries growing there. So the Friends of Mothers Initiative is a cooperative. When I started, it was about 24 women farmers, average farm size 2 acres, fair trade and US organic certified. And they're, I think now also Rainforest Alliance certified. So it's very high-end specialty coffee, really picked one berry at a time, and they only pick the ripe red berries. It's processed by hand, it's sorted by hand, it's packaged by hand. So it ends up being very, very high quality coffee. And so this was a promotional shot I took for to promote and when I got there, they'd been a cooperative for 2 years, but hadn't shipped any coffee yet. The farmers were still selling. The farmers are all women, and they were still selling just to spot market buyers for very low prices. But the idea of the cooperative was to band together and get some market power and get better prices. And fair trade is an actual institution, and they guarantee a minimum price, which is probably the most valuable thing that they do. And then they also inspect and certify that the coffee is what they say it is, and they're also organic certification inspectors that come to make sure they're really doing what they say they're doing. And Juliet was one of the best farmers, very smart. Her husband Peter is a high school teacher, and really good farmers and really into the program, and were early adopters. So this is, you see the red berries here. She just picks them one at a time when they're maximum ripeness, and then this actually wasn't hers. There are a few more green berries. She would scoff at this. This was just somebody else's coffee that I happened to take a picture of, and they had a few more green berries. They weren't part of the cooperative, but hers would have been all red. And then this was a little fake promotional shot of me picking berries, which I did for about 15 minutes. And then this is how they process it. They've got a hand crank machine that it's called a pulper. It takes the pulp off the berry and leaves the coffee bean without pulp. You can see it's about 95% effective there. And shoot, where's my, there it is. So again, that was sort of for show that I did that. And then this, after they pulp it, they sit down and sort through it to get all the missed beans out, or the broken beans, to make sure that the quality is the top AA quality, that they commands the best prices. And there you can see the bad ones sorted out, or the jackets that they've sorted by hand. And then this was actually and then they dry it, and they dry it on tarps. They weren't actually drying it here, although it looks a lot like this. They spread it out on tarps and dry it in the sun. These women were actually getting some of the chafe. They had brought it to sell, and it had it had too much byproduct still in it. So they were winnowing it in the wind to make it cleaner. And then this is the result. This is this is called a parchment bean. So it still has a layer on it that you can't really see of parchment that has to be taken off. But this is the product as it leaves the farm, the dried bean, ready for, it just has to be, the parchment has to be removed by a machine, and then it's ready for roasting. And I know Kathy will like this one. This woman was also a great farmer, unbelievable, mother of 6, farms one of the larger farms, and all on steep mountainsides. And she's not single; she's very married. But I think she still enjoyed the humor of this shirt. So now I'm going to show you some of the farmers. This woman was actually retired from farming. Her daughter was still farming across the road. She's the grandmother of Timothy and Kenneth that I showed you. And Kenneth warned me about her, said she was a pest, but she'd come over every day and have tea with me. And she was actually very pleasant and would only stay about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And she didn't come every day, but 5 days a week or so she'd come, and I'd make her a cup of tea and we'd sit and visit. And she was good. She didn't speak a word of English, so I had to speak to her in Lugisu, which is the local language, although she didn't have very many teeth and she was hard to understand. Even in Lugisu, I had trouble understanding her, but nonetheless, I learned a lot of language from her. These are some more farmers. So we had to go out as part of the certification. We had to go and visit every farm and inspect before the inspector came. So we inspected to make sure that the inspector would find everything okay when they came. And so I went around with Mahasilama, and it was my idea to take a picture of every farmer. They have a form they fill out about their farm and what they do, and where they're located. And my improvement, part of the value I added as a Peace Corps volunteer, was that I put GPS coordinates for every farm and mapped them on Google Earth, and then took a picture of every farmer. And many of these women have had very few pictures taken of them. It's like a big deal to have your picture taken. So I would take their picture and then show it to them, and that always was a lot of hilarity and laughing. And in this case, I took her picture, and then she asked me to take another picture with her daughter, and got this beautiful, beautiful shot. Little slides are a little out of order here. So part of my job was when you sell fair trade coffee, and we did sell coffee after I'd been there for a few months. We sold a container of coffee to a broker in New York. And part of the profits then are put into what they call charmingly a communitary fund. And the communitary fund is basically like a community foundation. It's a pretty small amount of money. We sold an $80,000 container of coffee, and the community contribution was about $1,500, but that's a huge amount of money in this community. And then the mothers, the cooperative members, decide what they want to spend it on, a community project. And so their main project was to send orphans and vulnerable children to school, and all school is fee-based there. So they paid their school fees, bought them books, which you can see in their hands, and bought them school uniforms, which most of them have on here. And so these were some of the caretakers of these children. Many of them are orphans or sort of functional orphans. And this was the group that we provided scholarships for, or most of the group. And that I kind of facilitated that and checked up on it and went around and did interviews and, just tried to check up and make sure the kids were going to school, et cetera, et cetera. Great program. And the mothers were way into it. This girl missed the original gathering there, missed the photo. She came late. And so Mahasilama on the left there insisted that we take this picture of her. And she, as you can see, is albino and an orphan. And albinism is not rare, but not common there. But, I'd say every day I'd see somebody that had albinism. And there's a lot of prejudice in the past, and a lot of really terrible things that are associated with albinism. That's changing now. And so, but this girl was an orphan and in pretty tough shape, actually. I don't know if you can see in the picture, she's severely sunburned. And noticing that, Peace Corps had given me a huge tube of sunblock, which I never used. And so I gave it to her, and then I quickly requisitioned 3 more tubes from Peace Corps and gave her those as well. So she had a pretty much an annual supply of sunblock. And I also got it arranged for her to have a hat. So that was the kind of thing. This is one of the women I saw earlier. You can see get a feeling for the steepness here. She was taking us around for a tour of her farm, and we had to run up and down these hills behind her. And I thought she was a teenager. I did, at this point, I didn't find out later that she was a mother of 6 and probably in her 30s, but she completely kicked my butt on these hills, going up and down. As you can see, she's barefoot, and she can run up and down these hills like a gazelle. This is one of my favorite people, Agnes. She was very fierce, as you can see. And you can see you'll see in the portraits, most of the women are smiling and very happy to have their portrait taken. And of course, I always ask permission, and I always ask permission if I could share the photos on the internet or with other people, and wouldn't use them if they all gave permission, but I was careful to get that. And when I asked her for permission, she sort of begrudgingly said yes. And then I took this picture. And as I said, when I show them the picture, there would be huge peals of laughter, and the whole family would gather around to see the picture. And when I showed her picture, she literally glanced at it and said, whatever, picked up her hoe and went back to work. But she was an amazing person, became a good friend. This is the woman we saw going down the hill earlier. And this gives you an idea of this, again, a farm inspection gives you an idea of the steepness here. And the picture, of course, always flattens it. So it was about a 40-degree angle on this field, and that's normal there. So everything I went, this woman was a special friend of mine. She was actually one of the older people in her early 60s and didn't have eyeglasses. And so, but she was literate, which is unusual for an older woman. And so whenever she needed to read something, she'd borrow my glasses to read. And these are 2 sisters. And this is Namakana, who became kind of the poster child for the coffee. The group selected her to be the face of the coffee brand. And Namakana in Lugisu literally means "I love you all." And you can see from her face why she was chosen to be the face of it, because she's just got that beautiful, kind face, and she was a beautiful, kind person. This is Youssef on buying day, so they're actually bringing in their coffee, weighing it, and getting paid, which was a big event. There was a lunch involved. He's eating lunch at this point, but you see the scale behind him there. And then this is how the coffee is shipped to the warehouse in Mbale. These motorcycle taxis are ubiquitous in Africa and East Africa and Uganda, and they're called boda bodas. And I found out that the reason they're called that is that they started as bicycles in a border community, and they were called border boys by the British back in the colonial days. And then that became sort of creolized into boda boda. And so they're still called boda boda or boda boda boys. Of course, they're men, but they're motorcycle taxis, very cheap, ubiquitous. It's the main form of transportation there. And it's Youssef is on the far right there, and that's Peter, is Juliet's husband, in the pink shirt, just getting the stuff shipped off. So they would ship probably, on a normal buying day, probably ship 40 bags of this, 2 at a time, on these boda bodas, right at the limit of their ability to carry freight. And then we had a program of replanting coffee, so they, to keep the coffee groves fresh. They mix the crops together. Coffee's grown in the shade, usually under trees. And so we would, every couple of weeks, we'd have a little party after a group meeting and plant some coffee on somebody's property. And I always grabbed a hoe and joined in, which caused huge amusement, because men normally aren't, and certainly European or American men never ever pick up a hoe. And so it would cause a lot of amusement. You can see the hoe is backwards there. It wasn't because I didn't know how to use it. I was breaking up clods of dirt with the back of the hoe, so I didn't. And then this is their first coffee shipment that went to New York, loaded in the truck. So you can see the bags of green coffee there, all checked and certified, and they inspected. And then this is the final wrap up of the container that went on the truck and went off to Mombasa to be shipped to New York. And then this is the coffee. So Namakana is the brand. They on the back, they say it comes from the Friends of Mothers. And this is a retailer that bought it from the broker and sold it through the through their company, which is in North Carolina, I think, North Carolina, or South, I think in North Carolina. And I put a link in the chat so you can buy some if you want to. And then this is the back, and there's the, they take a picture of one of the growers and then have an artist render it. And so this is Namakana Agnes, a little description of her. And that's how this company, it's a company run by women, and only deals in organic free trade coffee grown by women around the world. So if you go there and look for this brand, you can order it, $15 a pound. And I'm told it's among the best in the world. So the coffee cooperative continues to thrive in my absence. I wasn't really in charge of it. I was just helping, facilitating, and learning about coffee, which I didn't know a thing about when I got there. But I'm going to leave the coffee cooperative now and just talk about my life in general. And food, of course, is something people always ask about. And the food in Uganda is very simple and plain. It's not like Ethiopia where it's sought after, but one of the things they do there that's unique is they eat live ants. And these are flying ants. They call them white ants, I guess because of the wings, but they're actually black. But you just get them like this in a cup. They're alive, they're crawling around, and you pick up a handful and eat them like this. Oh, that's the goat in the background. I didn't even hear that after a while, a turkey. So you grab up a scoop and then you pop them in your mouth. That was literally my first mouthful, but they actually are very good. And they know there that they taste like cashews, and they have a really not a buggy mouthfeel. They kind of taste, they crunch like nuts, and they don't wiggle around or anything. So if you just think of them as cashews, they go down very easily. And I became very fond of them and ate lots of them. They're seasonal, they come out of the ground, and that's what's happening here. We were having a meeting and all of a sudden somebody pointed and said, ants are coming and out of the ground. And we all rushed over there and chowed down on ants fresh out of the ground. And it's a delicacy. They also point out, invariably, every time I ate ants, somebody would say to me with very sincerely, they're an excellent source of protein. and that is important in their diet. They're subsistence farmers. 85% of Ugandans are still on the land, and so they don't eat very much meat. Meat is a luxury there. So this source of protein is traditional and well utilized. They're all about bananas in Uganda. They grow like 13 or 14 different varieties of bananas, including a dish called matoke, which is green bananas boiled and smashed up, and that's their staple. And then they also eat ripe bananas. This is passion fruit, just off the tree in the yard. We did have a cow, that's Timoth. He would have me come and hold the flashlight while he milked the cow if he got a little late in his chores and it got dark. So I did that frequently. I tried to get him to let me milk it, but he wouldn't. Another source of protein are these minnows. They seine out of the rivers and the swamps there, and they just dry them whole. They're so guts and all. They dry them and then salt them, and then they boil them and put them on rice with tomatoes in this case. This was something I ate a lot of, and actually it's also quite good, kind of yucky when you first see it, but delicious. This was at a drinking party I was invited to, but they had a chicken there. So obviously a special occasion, sort of welcoming me to the community. And if you're the guest of honor, you get the gizzard. So they presented this to me with great ceremony. And of course I had to eat it, but it was good. This was Thanksgiving Day. This was my Thanksgiving dinner. I thought it was ironic. So that's the matoke on the left, the steamed bananas. Usually they mash it up. In this case, they were whole. You can see the fresh avocados there, and then beans and cabbage. And that's pretty much what I ate every day. So no spicing, absolutely bland. This was a celebration after a meeting. So we had lunch. We didn't do this every meeting, but this was a special meeting. So there you can see the rice and beans, very common. Usually we'd eat them with our hands. I don't know why they had forks there, and then this is the local beer made out of millet, and I drank a lot of this. This is a beer party. They drink them out of these tubs in the middle. It's got the consistency of like a wheatgrass smoothie. So it's kind of a thick, um, opaque brown liquid, pretty low alcohol. I never really got drunk, but then they have these long straws and they pass the straws around and drink this beer. And it is possible to get drunk. You have to drink an awful lot of it though, but it's a social club and they actually use them for raising money and for establishing community. And so I participated in this a lot and really grew fond of the beer. They also brew their own gin there, and I did that a couple times, but I steered clear of it. The gin groups were pretty serious alcoholics. This is another beer thing. And so I'm just going to quickly go through now. This is some scenery of hikes I went on. It's a beautiful country. I did what they call abseiling or rappelling, we call it here, off that waterfall. This is a circumcision ceremony. They circumcise young men at the age of 15 or 16 publicly there. And that's a big part of their culture. As far as I know, it's unique in the world, just to the Bagisu tribe. It's a big deal, a lot of music, a lot of dance, a lot of drinking, and pretty crazy. This was a neighbor, Mr. Masawari, and he was 104 years old and had a birth certificate to prove it. Completely sharp, could still hear. Just a week before this picture was taken, he hiked up the mountain that I showed you to 9,000 feet for a wedding. He hiked up with his family, but they didn't help him. He was able to walk up there by himself, basically 4,000 feet straight uphill for the wedding. And I'd see him everywhere. He was obviously a treasure in the community and really nice guy. And this was just, it was raining one day, so these two guys picked me up. And I love this picture because these are just classic Bagisu faces. They're very fierce mountain people, but once they adopt you, they love you, and you're in forever. You're in for life. This was my barber. It cost me 60 cents to get my hair cut. This was a flood I was in and almost got killed. The water was across the road at a bridge crossing. Let's see here, we almost get swept off. I'm saying to him, Bola, which means slowly, slowly. There's a truck swept off the road. And then they yelled Apayo, which means be careful. And then we were swept off to the edge and we almost went over. It was a very close call. And if we had, we would have been killed instantly. So, and then my other big project there, I know I'm running out of time here, is thing that I did was start a band with my mentor and teacher here, tribal musician Wamakubo, who became my very dear friend. And he would also serve me beer. That was for $2. I'd get an hour-long lesson, a pitcher of beer, and a meal, which he called a snack, but it was a full meal. And he loved it. It was good income for him. This was a wedding gig that he and I played together. And I was torn about what to wear. I ended up wearing a suit coat, and this is what he wore. An improved toilet is a family's pride. So, so I figure, well, I can wear anything I want then. And then this, I won't show you this whole thing, but this is him. I love the girls in the background. So like everywhere else in the world, that's a very, very ancient traditional song. And it's basically a welcome song for any ceremony. And like everywhere else in the world, their traditional music is dying out and everybody's listening to pop music, to Beyonce. And so I started this band that, not this band, but a band with kids mostly that played traditional music. And Wamakubo knew 300 songs that were pre-colonial traditional tribal songs, but he rarely gets hired anymore. He hadn't given a lesson in 10 years. And my interest kind of perked up interest in the village. And so this was kind of a jam session one day. So that was fun, but the band we ended up with was 5 people and kids, and the idea was to learn the traditional music and then play it for weddings and funerals and tourists in Mbale and make it an income generating thing for Wamakubo and other people. And Wamakubo was a fabulous teacher, and here he is teaching our drummer, who was about 12, a new rhythm, and you can just see the way they interact here. That was literally the day before I got evacuated. And then this is Wamakubo. That's his primary school where he went. And again, you can see from our faces, that's indicative of our relationship. I'm just going to flash through these. Uganda, obviously beautiful country with huge parks where you can go see animals, which I did. And then these are the crazy bugs of Uganda, which was one of my most popular Facebook. Oh, this slide's out of place. This guy on the right is an Austrian coffee buyer who came to visit and ended up buying a container and is now on order for another container. And he said that the coffee from our cooperative he's been in the coffee business, specialty coffee business, 45 years as a broker. And he said our coffee was among the top 3 that he'd tasted in his life. So that's, if you don't take my word for it, take his word for it, because he really knew what he was doing. Giant slug, praying mantis, water bug, some other kind of weird beetles. And then this is Timothy and Kenneth's wife. In my food cabinet, they were always fascinated by the food that I had bought to eat because they thought it was so goofy. And then this was the morning I got the call on Sunday, or I got an email on Sunday morning at 7 a.m. And on Monday morning at 8 a.m., I was on the bus to Kampala. And a couple days later, I was on a plane from Kampala to Addis Ababa to Dublin to Chicago to Duluth and back home. And in the O'Hare airport, which was deserted, I bought this Chicago dog for $12, which is exactly what I would spend per month on food in Uganda. And that was for 2 or 3, actually funding food for 2 and 3 people. So that's the irony. And 48 hours after leaving Kampala, here I was on the Sugar Bush ski trail system. So that's the slideshow.